And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Curtis C., who is a Director of Strategy at Penfield. How are you, Curtis?
Good. How are you, David?
I love people with diverse background, and you did not start in cybersecurity. You were on your way to become an accountant. Is that correct?
Yes, so I did graduate from the University of British Columbia with a Bachelor's of Management and a specialization in accounting. And for quite a while, I was studying for the LSATs and looking to get into law school. And I decided to do a summer job. Essentially, I was going to do a job for a little bit at IBM. With the plans of going into law school at some point. And then 6.5 years later, I never left. I stayed within cybersecurity. I started out doing project management, so building security operation centers. And then with my accounting and audit background from my education, I dove into sort of the compliance aspect of cybersecurity. And I became a consultant in cybersecurity at the end of the day. I did four-ish years of project management in cyber. So it's like a little mini cyber degree. I did a little mini cyber degree at IBM, and I never left. It's been good. It's treated me really well, and the people have been really nice. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll dive into kind of the building SOC experience, because that's a tremendous experience that people are not. It's not something that you expose on a day-to-day basis, and you had the opportunity to do this with one of the top tier consulting firms in the world, right? So IBM is no joke, and there's the processes they go through. So tell me about kind of the early days of your career. Like, what was it like to go from an accounting background to get a hands-on experience, and what was it like for you to be exposed to that area of the business?
Yeah, I have a funny story for you that will sort of
I love stories. That's what we're here for.
Highlight and emphasize this. So I was really early on in my career, and I think one of my first projects, and my manager at that time, I don't know what he saw in me that he thought he brings me into the IBM office and says, let's do an interview, and I say great, and he ends up hiring me. But I started out with a DDoS project and deploying sort of Akamai DDoS across multiple domains. And then the next project I got assigned to was sort of pen testing and then building the SOC. And I didn't know enough at that point in time. And so IBM had just hired a new consultant with a lot of experience in building SOCs and identity and access management. And he was his first, I think, 2 or 3 days into the job, and he went into headquarters for training, sort of like the, welcome to IBM. This is what we're all about. And he had been at IBM before, and I remember I messaged the manager and I said, I need a resource to help me build a SOC. And he said, oh, great, reach out to this person. He's actually in Markham right now, and he'll be able to help you. Very experienced. And I was like, perfect. I messaged him at that point in time. It was same time, and I pinged him and I said, we need to chat. I've got a project plan I need you to help with. We're trying to build this thing. It's a SOC, and we sit down and he goes, "What are you crazy? You're building this?"
Yeah, and I mentioned it sometimes, and again, Curtis, from what I've seen, you'd be surprised. You may end up in 5 years from now getting acquired by IBM, and then come back to IBM just at a very senior level position because you kind of joined forces with them. But so you never know. Just having this opportunity to do something else, I think, is priceless, especially for someone like yourself who's done it for quite some time. Now you get exposed to the kind of, but I'm sure you've been drinking from the hose, like just trying to get all the things all aligned in your new role.
It's been insane. It's been absolutely bloody insane. But to go back to sort of one of your earlier questions around, what was it about Penfield? And truth be told, I I very much said no to scene at the very get go. I was like, get out of here. I'm not joining an early stage startup. What are you, crazy? And then I think the turning point was some version of, Tasim's persistence, his openness to help, to allow me to do what I want to do. And then also the product. So we ended up doing a product demo. And when I saw the product, it was amazing, right? And I knew I was excited because the first things that came into my head were, these are the things my clients have been asking for. These are the things that my clients want. Automated QA, dynamic processes, the mean time to resolutions, the skill heat maps. Like, as soon as he started pulling these things out of the demo, and Alice, one of our team members, the two of them sort of did the demo together. It was like just one after another. And then I started getting ideas. And then I was like, can it do this? Can it do that? And it was like, no, but that's brilliant. Or no, that's already in our roadmap. Or no, I'm going to take a note and add that to the roadmap. Like, and so then I got really excited because I was able to, there's something that I know people really need. There's something that I can help build. And so that to me got really exciting. And there was another conversation with Dr. Hassan, who's the other co-founder of Penfield, and Devajit, who's the lead for sort of customer success of a product. But one of my, and I've always said this to people that ask me these questions around, like, what do you want to do in life? There's three things in the top of my resume that always have stayed there. They've never changed. Any job I apply to, anyone that asks for a copy of my resume, those three things don't change. And the gist of those three things essentially is, I want to learn. It has to be fun. It has to be a team dynamic, and it has to have societal impact. And I think that's where Dr. Hassan said, I remember in our call, he's like, one last thing to add. At some point, the technology that Penfield has is going to solve other societal problems that we have, specifically around sort of emergency response and type of things like that. And so I think the future vision of that really also was exciting to me. That we do have this thing in the back of our heads that's like, okay, this can help solve a lot of societal impact issues. And don't get me wrong, as you know, I know, and everyone that's been on your show knows, cyber is very, very important to our stable society today. The minute any of our banks get attacked, or there's and we see it, elections and things like that. Like, the minute any of those fundamental institutions have any whiff of a cyber breach, the trust and the faith that the public has in it is gone. And so cyber is very important from that perspective. So those are the reasons why I had decided to join Penfield. But I think personally, from like what I want out of my job was a lot of the product side of things. And not to get too much into it, because I feel like some of your other questions will dive into it a little. But one big thing for me was the automated quality assurance piece. Because I have clients that do manual QA so often, right? Like, so you do your SOC alerts and you have your tickets, and some of them do spot audits, some of them do 100% QA. But this is all manual. This is all someone sitting there reviewing the ticket, and so Penfield has this capability to do automated QA, and it can highlight based on confidence intervals where you need to focus your attention from a QA perspective. And that to me was like mind blowing. It was that right there was like hours of someone's life that we're going to spare to focus more on high value work. So that was sort of the impetus for being like, yeah, Penfield's cool. Let's go.
And like I try to keep all of my next questions in order when I listen to you, and this brings so many questions. So one is, I'll mention the fact is that a lot of times entrepreneurs, what they do is they see a gap somewhere, and they've seen the status quo or how bad things are, and then they go out and change it. And even though you did not potentially you saw the gap, you did not go ahead and change it, but you attach yourself to a company that is making that change because you saw all the gaps that were in the current status quo of how SOC operates. So it was like you saw the light in terms of like, okay, this is how things are done, and all of a sudden these were the gaps, and wow, like, and then the product, and then the other piece is that you as you mentioned, it's really amazing that you have this, like, couple of things that you wanted to from your next role, and this happens to align with those, which again, I think a lot of people struggle with that. They are looking for the next position, but not necessarily know exactly what that would be. But they don't have those kind of stars that need to align for them to accept that. So I think that's something that people can really relate to in terms of what you just mentioned. So when you joined, did you what was kind of the first customer engagements that you come across? And then let's dive into like Penfield specifically. How does that look like from a customer perspective as well? And maybe like just what are the kind of the top 3 things that the platform solves?
Yeah. So, and I think quickly to sort of reflect upon one of the things you just mentioned, I am tremendously lucky. This whole notion of the stars aligning to what you said earlier, I don't think, I'm very happy about it. My family has recently asked me, how are you enjoying your job? The new job, like, and normally, when you ask people how they do in their jobs, they have a gripe here, a gripe there. I have been.
Curtis, how do you even explain what you do? Like it's tough because even explaining somebody, family doesn't know what building up security operations center means. I don't think it's not something you can do. How do you explain that?
Yeah.
I do.
I explained it. I explained it on Family Day because we just had a long weekend here in Canada. I explained it on Family Day, and my uncle responded with, "In English, please."
Even though you're speaking, obviously, but it's funny because they know accounting, right? So if you said to them, "I'm an accountant. I'm a corporate accountant. I'm so they understand that it's something people relate to. But cybersecurity is such a niche kind of like, and especially it's not even cybersecurity as a whole. It's a vertical within the vertical within something that you solve a problem. It's very, very different.
It is, and they definitely sort of as long as I'm happy, they were happy. I think that was the notion. But in terms of my first day or first 2 days at Penfield, I think I got tossed into not tossed. I was invited into some client meetings, and it was great. I took pages and pages and pages of notes because I didn't know what was going on. And then I think day 2, we met with a partner and one of their VPs, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like day 2 at a startup, and I'm meeting with a large companies, VP and working on partnerships with them. So that was really neat. But I think this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about what excited me about Penfield, and I mentioned the 100% QA piece, and so I won't dwell too much on 100% automated QA. But the other pieces that Penfield has the ability to do, one of the other ones that we're seeing our customers are really excited about, and I know from my time at IBM, our clients would be really excited about this, is that dynamic process mapping. And so Penfield has the ability to sort of see what your analysts are doing every step of the way. It knows, the time it took an analyst to look something up in VirusTotal to the time that they made the decision that the alert is either a true positive or false positive. And so that process mapping, what you're really able to do is sort of understand everything that's going on almost in the analyst's head and drawn out in a pretty picture. And not, so what does that do, right? And so that helps. One really good use case is CSERTs and doing postmortems. So you can go back and be like, okay, the analyst did this, and this. Was that right or was that wrong? The other thing it really helps with is we do a lot of playbooks these days that are done because they're important, don't get me wrong, but sometimes they're done for compliance purposes as well. And so we do the playbook once, we give it to an analyst, they go through it, and then as soon as they start really realizing what they're supposed to do, they sort of stop referring back to the playbook. And then they start building upon the playbook. But when they build upon the playbook, that stays within their head, and it doesn't really get shared amongst the team. And so with this dynamic playbook capability, it's really able to take the playbooks and sort of share that institutional knowledge with the rest of your analyst team, in addition to for your new analyst and to do training. I think the other thing also is this whole notion of people, process, and technology. We talk about it. We bang the drum all the time. I'm sure you've been in meetings where people buy the technology because they think it solves the problem, without putting the people or the process behind the technology to solve the problem. And that was another thing that really excited me about Penfield. Penfield has the ability to do skill set heat mapping, and this is really important. This is what we should all be doing. We invest millions and millions of dollars in these security operations centers, but we don't really actually know the skill sets of our analysts. We sort of rely on the managers to be able to talk to your analyst on a one-on-one, on a monthly one-on-one, or a weekly one-on-one, and also be able to sort of maybe keep track of some of these things in Excel or in a SAP checkpoint kind of type tool. And so we really need to be able to better understand what our skills and our gaps are in our SOCs, specifically as it relates to their ability to answer or investigate certain types of alerts. And so Penfield is able to create these skill set heat maps, and really be able to learn about where your analyst is good at answering certain types of alerts and where he or she might need some training. And so that was one of the things that I had said to Scene in the demo that I mentioned that he did for me was, that's really cool that you have your skill set heat map. Does that tie back to training material? Can that feed back into SAP Checkpoint? Can that feed into a training plan for security analysts? So it's there as part of their monthly or quarterly annual sort of career goals and career planning. And so, that's just one piece. That's the people part, right? So people and then process. So as I mentioned, we can do all this notion of automated process discovery. And so, really improving and fine tuning the processes that you have, building playbooks that are actually more dynamic versus static and on paper. Listen, I've built playbooks. I have built communication plans. I've built playbooks. I make them look as pretty as I possibly can. But they're not dynamic. And if you don't put in a process to update them every month, every quarter, the playbook sort of becomes a static piece of paper that doesn't get updated, but our threat actors are changing every day. And so the notion of the dynamic playbook, I also think is really key to SOCs in the future. If you want to build a SOC that is able to really respond dynamically to institutional threats and threats to your company, you need to be able to ensure that your playbooks are updated, and that's where this dynamic playbook really comes in. And so tying those three things together, the people, the process, and the technology, and then obviously the technology, we've got data lakes, we've got SIMs, we've got XDRs, but the idea for Penfield is to sort of tie all those three things together, and really. And I feel like you must have talked to Tassine about this, but the fundamental thesis or hypothesis, of Penfield is the whole notion of human in the loop, right? And so AI is not there to automate everything. We say that over and over again.
I asked Tassine if if the last analyst has already been born. And he was laughing.
Of course you did.
You know.
And the answer really from Penfield's perspective, and honestly from my perspective, the answer is no. Right, the last analyst has not yet to be born. I don't know what will happen in 100 years, but in the foreseeable future, the last analyst is not born yet. Right, we really need to ensure we're elevating our humans to focus on the most value add tasks. And how do we do that? Well, we ensure that we build processes for them to follow that are dynamic, that are actually relevant. We ensure that we elevate the human to better educate themselves and understand where the threats are coming from. And it really speaks to sort of Penfield's overall theory or hypothesis that it really needs to be human in the loop, and it really needs to elevate that human potential. But yeah, and like I said, I've been to too many organizations where it's technology. It's just let's buy it, right? Or they buy it and it sits there and it doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah.
So
it sits there and looks at you after 3 months of massaging. I think that's what happens with a lot of software.
And I think if we talk about SOAR implementations, right? Mm-hmm. If you take a look at SOAR implementations, and I haven't done, obviously, I've done a ton of SIM stuff, and IBM, owns QRadar, and QRadar is quite a popular SIM in the industry. But if we take a look at SOAR implementations, organizations are struggling with SOAR implementations, and so we don't want a SOAR to end up being another case management tool, right? And so, this whole notion of the dynamic playbook is another really intriguing thing, because I remember when SOAR became, a really big topic, companies were acquiring SOAR platforms. It was exciting because it could, run automated playbooks. But in reality, I saw a lot of companies struggling to build out these automated playbooks, because you needed to bring a lot of people together to be able to understand the process and then be able to implement it. Really cool about Penfield, it can pull out those dynamic playbooks like I mentioned earlier. So you really see the baseline of what people are doing, and then you can improve your SOAR playbooks. And so it goes back to, as you were saying, that multi-billion-dollar investments or million-dollar investments that just sit there. That's another piece, right? SOAR is one that I know organizations have struggled with to implement in the way that I think the product envisioned. And so,
what is the absolute number one role for SOC, and what is that process? You mentioned the process like for the analyst to review, and then you mentioned kind of the playbooks and kind of the end results of it all. Maybe we can kind of review that.
Yeah, I guess the absolute, and this is where I think SOCs really are changing, right? SOCs are changing a significant amount these days, especially if we look at sort of financial institutions and this whole notion of a fusion center, right? SOCs are very much, I think, if we look at what SOCs were when I first entered the industry, and listen, I speak like I'm old. I'm only 30. I haven't been in the industry as long as most people, right? And so, but if we look at when I first joined, at least, so about 6.5 years, 7 years ago now, SOCs were, let's take the alerts, we build use cases, and then output something for someone to look at, investigate, and then be able to say, yes, this is real, or no, this is a false positive. And if it's real, let's further investigate it, tier 2 and then tier 3, and then, okay, now it's an incident.
Yeah.
And Curtis, high level.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I will mention to that the reason why, and you and I had a conversation about this, why there's no full on automation for this is, I think, because the signal to noise ratio is very low, and meaning that a lot of times it's hard to detect what is an actual, run of the mill activity on the network from an adversary activity. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, and I think to your point, as you mentioned the ratio, there was and still is, but false positive and noise reduction was really, I think, one of the biggest things. And that is really how you, at the end of the day, manage your workforce, and you manage the amount of alerts you can ingest, right? So you tune your SIM so that it can get to a certain level of offenses per minute or events per second, right? And so that your analyst isn't overwhelmed with a queue of 100 alerts when they get in. And then the SOC manager or the SOC director's overwhelming fear is over tuning it and then missing something, right? So there's a balance there. But I think we're really moving away from that notion of tuning the SIM, and like we're really trying to move our abilities upstream. You know, we're talking about red teaming, we're talking about blue teaming, purple teaming, threat hunting, fusion centers, like all of these new quote unquote new advents. I think is the future direction of the SOC. We're seeing the SOC being responsible for more because it has the resources. It is the fundamental bedrock of the technology. And even technology of SOCs is changing, right? We see a lot more SIMs and a lot more SOCs implementing data lakes in order to do a lot of their alerting work. And so if we do that, then now we have a data lake. Now it's not just analysts looking at alerts. Now we have a data lake. What can the analysts or threat hunting teams or other teams do with this data that is somewhat SOC-esque, but we can also take that further and maybe do more proactive activities to protect the organization, right? If we take a look at like a NIST CSF, there's the identify, protect, detect, respond. Like if we look at that cycle, we're trying to move upstream and do less downstream. And I think that's where we're seeing SOCs go into the future, is how do we do more protection and detection upstream. So that because at the end of the day, we do have to tune what we give the analysts, because we give them too much. At the end, they won't be able to handle it. Right. And Penfield is doing some really cool work there where they're trying to do, coupling of same, similar, and related events, so that we reduce the workload on the analyst, but also intelligently trying to group same, similar, and related events so that we can better identify the threat, not from a single stream, but correlate multiple things from different, areas of the organization, and so and give it to the analyst. No, we're not, we go back to the fact, and I know, Seem's been on your show, like I said, he said this before. We're not trying to do false positive reduction. We're not trying to do noise reduction. But if we gather the things intelligently and feed it to the analyst intelligently, they can probably better understand. Yes, this does look bad. Yes, this looks like someone's trying to do something here, here, and here. And make a knowledgeable conclusion out of that. And so that's where I think we see our SOCs going. Yeah.
And then you mentioned these playbooks, right? And then the need for a dynamic one, as you mentioned, because you brought up an excellent point. The adversaries are continuously moving, right? And things are changing. And by the way, that leads me to another thing you mentioned, which is also critical. We're kind of on the verge of a cyber attack from nation states. We had the Ukraine invasion, and a lot of people are asking me like what the consequences are. So I think we're going to have some associated cyber attack on the US at some point, and which may or may not affect us. But long story short, you mentioned these playbooks and the need for having dynamic playbook. What is that all about? Like, what is it? Let's define the kind of the playbook, and what, how does a Penfield specifically helps with that?
Yeah. So two things. One, obviously very topical. I don't know when this will release, but David, you're bringing it up because the news came out this morning about the invasion, and to your point, and this is sort of a side piece, but my other interests are politics, geopolitics, international relations, etc. And so, yes, to your point, that is very much, I think, what is coming. We see nation states, behaving and participating more in cyber warfare than we do and the reduction in sort of, obviously we're rolling in tanks this morning, but cyber warfare is almost more damaging. And so, yeah, in terms of the dynamic playbooks, and part of what we're doing right now at Penfield is trying to show our customers or clients, like, this is what your analyst is doing, A to B. And I remember I had this session to review this dynamic playbook, and I remember Ahmed, one of our coworkers, and he's our data scientist, he said, I tried to make it very simple. And I put it in Notion just so that it's easier for you to understand. And I click the link and I open it, and it's this massive spider chart of like things going all over the place.
Is it as amazing, Curtis, that data scientists try to simplify things and then they click on something and it explodes?
Yeah, it's just this big thing. He also we're joking, and I don't know, like, he said the next time we meet, he's going to have Advil ready for me, because the joke is every time I talk to him, and this is another reason why Penfield's so exciting, is because there's so much to learn at Penfield. But every time I talk to him, my head hurts. Every time I talk to Dr. Hassan, my head hurts. But so he said this himself, like, it is so intriguing digging into the mind of the security analysts, and not in the very creepy Big Brother-ish way, but we're able to map out every single step that an analyst has taken, and also how long it took from point A to point B to point C to making a disposition about whether or not it's a true or false positive. I have never seen that. In the years that I've been. I don't know if you've had anyone on your show that has, or if you've seen it, David.
I think the reason being is that there's almost endless possibilities, right? I mean, it's the data set. So you talk about a data lake for that information is almost endless, right? Because there's just so many different scenarios, so many different, areas of, and even analysts that has been on the job for 10, 15 years. I think that they see new stuff every day. I think that's the issue, right? Because it's not like they can, okay, we've seen that before 10, 15 times. Most often than not, it's not, right? It's
correct. And I think that's where the dynamic playbook conversation comes in, right? The threats are changing. So you can't take the playbook you created for the compliance activity 3 months ago, or the update you made last quarter, and use it because something might have changed. And the analyst's intuition is what's needed to be like, that looks different. I'm going to do something different to try to investigate, right? And then take that, feed that back to the SOC manager to be like, was this the right process? If this is the right process, we should propagate that amongst everyone else so they know that with this new type of threat, I should do this thing differently. I
was about to say that it's the first time you can take all that tacit knowledge that only resides in one analyst's brain and knowledge, and propagate that throughout the analyst organization. And I think that by itself is probably one of the most powerful impact that this platform provides, right?
I don't know if, listen, I know I'm at the company, and I might sound like I'm drinking from the Kool-Aid, but everything I look at is powerful and cool and exciting. But I agree with you that it is very, very powerful, and it helps to that initial hypothesis of elevating human potential amongst your SOC, so that you're not you're not just doing static playbooks. I think the other thing, and what's really unique, and what I saw, I think, a few days ago, in order for us to do this, by the way, we also need to collect what is called human-machine interaction data, right? We need to be able to collect the data point where we understand what the analyst is doing. And so I think to keep in mind, there are aspects of Penfield that are new to organizations, but it's also training good habits. Because we need this data in order to ensure that Penfield is a successful platform in your SOC, we also need data. The data also means that you need to train good habits in your SOC in order for us to be actually able to use the data, right? And so, that notion of human-machine interaction data doesn't necessarily exist in every single SOC today. But once again, another very powerful and exciting piece of what Penfield does is the technology is able to capture that data and feed it through to the overall platform. But that has never existed up until today for a lot of SOCs. We don't know, listen, an analyst can open an alert, look at it, be like, hey, it's not too bad. I'll do this thing. Maybe I'll go grab lunch, come back, do something, or go to the bathroom. But we're also able to take a look at, and also eliminate sort of inefficiencies. So if there's certain things that an analyst is waiting a lot on, if they're running scans or if we look at that and we're like, wow, an analyst spends almost over the course of a month, 10 hours just waiting for this scan to run, because now Penfield is able to capture how long it took them from point A to point B. We can take a look and go back to the root cause. Why is the scan taking so long? Can we improve it any other way? So our analyst isn't sitting there wasting time, twiddling their thumbs. And so we're able to look into where there are bottlenecks within the process as well. And it's another really, like I said, exciting thing about Penfield, being able to measure how long it takes from someone to get from one thing to another to another.
Yeah, and it's almost the mechanics of interactions between the analyst and the machine, which sometimes is if you can shave a few minutes from every review, I mean that translates to tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of dollars on a yearly basis, depending on the size of the SOC, right?
Yeah, and I think let's not forget also the other use cases of Penfield around not only one SOC, but the MSSPs, right? And so when you shave, X amount of time, and we all know that MSSPs do this. When you shave X amount of time from an analyst's day, and you're able to fit maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more alerts into their day, you might be able to onboard an additional client without,
it's
increasing.
Huge, Curtis. Yeah,
exactly.
The devil's in the details. There's a marginal cost, right? There's a fixed cost, and then if you can increase, have a sliver of extra, customer in there, that's translate to the huge bottom line, increase, right?
And the insights that you'll be able to get out of the platform is you'll be able to start taking a look at all your analysts and start being able to highlight, very consistent areas where they might be spending an extreme amount of time, and really be able to dig deep and understand why. And so, and listen, with the advent of BI tools, and not advent, but obviously BI tools have been around for a while, but they're becoming far more popular in SOCs these days than I would have seen in the past. And so, if we build these dashboards in a way where you can, and that's what the SOC manager should be doing, right? They building these dashboards, better understanding the data, and it's been a challenge up until this point. But the exciting thing is now we can get that data. We can pull it in. We can build and understand what an analyst is doing, so that we can better help them. So they're not wasting time on just sitting there waiting for something to come out. And so that's the MSSP sort of angle of it as well. And there's other SOCs out there that have to handle multitude of governments and agencies and departments. And so if you take a central government, for example, and they've got many departments and agencies, and so if we think of it that way, that's another time saved if you can save analysts time to help other departments, other agencies, health networks, etc. Right? So there's a lot of time that you can save with trying to better understand the processes of what analysts are doing, and that's where that dynamic process capability comes in. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a couple of things I will say. Maybe the first thing I'll say is if you want to learn more, tune into future parts of this webcast, because I know my coworkers will be on as well. But that is one of the problems that that Penfield and the co-founders and the team to date have really researched and ensuring that they solve is this cold start problem. And I know this is a concern for a lot of organizations. If I implement a AI or machine learning type esque thing, am I missing anything? Am I have I missed something I should have caught? Am I gonna, get a breach? Or, and once again, this goes back to the fundamental hypothesis of Penfield, which is it's all about ensuring that the human's in the loop. It's not about false positive reduction, right? And so Penfield is really able to, I believe it's just about 2 weeks of data, learn what it needs to in order. Obviously, it's an AI machine learning platform, so it gets better over time. But we're able to show results fairly quickly. And we actually haven't even talked about this yet on your show, so you'll have to tune in to future episodes. But one of the fundamental exciting parts of Penfield is the dynamic queuing capability, right? And so we're able to start doing the dynamic queuing with the analysts, and for those that we're coining a lot of terms at Penfield, so I think I should probably start defining some of them. But dynamic queuing essentially means, your analysts to date haven't been given alerts, unless a SOC manager was intelligently assigning them to analysts. Penfield's core and fundamental tenet is that it can do dynamic queuing, and I can't believe it's taken us 55 minutes to get to the fundamental core of it. But what it is capable of doing is understanding the context, the alert, and what the analyst is good at, and then assigning it to the analyst. And
you don't want to pause there for a second analyst. Because we had the kind of the build up towards that 55 minutes in. but it's a huge deal, right? And that's why I wanted us to pause, and that if anything, I mean, that by itself can increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the SOC overall, right? Is that a correct statement?
Yes, we can reduce mean time to resolution by 30, I believe it's 35 or 36%. So when for those that aren't eggheadish into the data of the metrics of a SOC, when you reduce your mean
I mean, that's a no-brainer because the SOC, again, people don't realize how much a SOC costs. So if you can increase the usability and time to resolution by 35%, that is, you can either decrease the size of the operations by 35% and get the same results, right? If my math is correct.
Well,
or get more, or maybe not 35, but or get more done with the same SOC instead of like just, right. Okay.
Have the capacity to do more. And the reason why I'm skeptical about saying reducing the capacity or the size or whatnot is because at the end of the day, SOCs, a lot of SOCs are 9x5. They should be 24/7 cycles. But you really can't reduce the capacity of a SOC a lot of the times, because if you want to run a 24/7 SOC, the number is 12. You need 12 people because you need to account for holidays, vacations, breaks, sick days, whatever. You need 12 people to do the full rotating shift of your first anchor sort of client or your institution, whatever the case. You need 12 people. And so the reason why you can't reduce it is because, the minute you reduce 1, 2, 3 people, you lose the ability to properly staff your security operations center. And so you do want to make sure what we're trying to do is give the analysts more time to focus on the right things. And so that's what, and like I said, for other use cases like MSSPs, onboard additional clients, take in additional, or even additional tools, right? I've been at SOCs where they've been hesitant to feed DLP data, or they've been hesitant to feed Zscaler, feeds into their SIM because it's just too noisy, or they don't have the capacity. And you might be missing something. You can't correlate that feed, and you might be missing something. And so giving your SOC the capacity to handle more relevant data. And when I say data, I really mean like the endpoint alert data is very, very important. And so
and it's critical for MSSP, especially because, again, talking to a lot of MSSPs, they customers require that 24/7, and some of them stop even offering the 9x5. The reason being, okay, what you have a customer calls you at 6:00 in the evening on a Friday. What are you going to tell them? Oh, it's out of the contract time. No, it's like you're going to take the call, or what they do is they charge them an exuberant amount of money to answer these calls after hours, which also pisses the customers off. So
Yep.
what you need to do is you need to offer that 24/7, but then, as you mentioned, there's a lot of hours, and
It's
you need to
expensive.
increase the effectiveness. Yeah, absolutely, very expensive.
It's very expensive, right? I think just to, I don't want to lose track of your questions. One of your earlier questions was, how can we deploy Penfield? One of the also really unique things about it is that it can be deployed in a virtual private cloud, any AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud, whatever the case may be. And so it essentially adheres to all your tenant compliance requirements, and so we can be deployed in very much in isolation in your environment. And having done more compliance activities than I care to admit, I can tell you it is very appreciated by organizations, because then they still continue to own the compliance and they don't need to go through requirements checklists, ensuring that their vendors are up to snuff and things like that. And so we can deploy in your infrastructure. In terms of the question of how to get Penfield and all of that, like I said, tune in. I will let my coworkers dive deeper into that one.
So, is it a true AI? When you show up to the data center or the SOC, does it say hello, Mr. Curtis? Thanks for coming. Or not yet?
No, I haven't seen that yet. No, there is no that is not the case. And what's quite unique and cool about Penfield is it can very much operate in the background of your existing SOC technology, right? So you don't actually interact with the platform. The platform is able to do the dynamic queuing through a connection with Microsoft Teams, or through a connection with your SOAR platform, or through your ITSM platform. So you actually really don't need to interact for certain capabilities of Penfield directly with Penfield. Obviously, for things like the skill set heat maps, or the dynamic processes, like those, you have to log into a platform. But what's really cool for an analyst is that you don't actually need to log into Penfield to use it. The dynamic queuing works in the background. It integrates with your SOAR, it integrates with your SIM and your ITSM tools, pulls all of it together, intelligently determines who is the right person to answer this ticket or this alert, and then dispatches the alert to the analyst. And we do it in multiple phases, right? We do it in a soft launch, so to speak. So we give you essentially what our recommendations. Penfield recommends that this is a good alert for you. We think you're best suited for this, and you can start learning. Maybe you're right. I am really good at this, or maybe and Tassine, I'm sure, has dug into this with you before, but there's more reasons than just who's more skilled at it, right? It's skill, it's accuracy, it's flow state, right? This whole notion of the flow state and being able to get into the rhythm of doing something means you can do it faster, but you also don't want to burn them out. So at some point you want to change up what they're doing. So there's a lot behind how we're doing the dynamic queuing of the alerts. But like I said, it does not welcome you like an AI. It's not like, welcome to Penfield's brain. Here, I will now tell you what to do.
That would be cool. Maybe it's the next release. So at least have some coolness effect to it.
I'll add that to the product roadmap.
Yes, you should. So in terms of reporting, like, what does that look like? I know that it was built by scientists and practitioners, right? So, and a lot of times, executives and people can't get enough of like data and graphs and what it shows. Like, what does that look like?
So there's a couple of things, and to be fair, these executives can't get enough of the data and the graphs and whatnot. And I've heard a lot of, it's not joking around, but it's very valid, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot on the agenda. I've sat on a board before. So when I was in some of my previous lives, I was involved in student politics and ended up sitting on the university's board of governors. And there's a lot to deal with, right? There's the institutional investment, there's HR, there's admin, there's finance, there's a lot boards need to deal with. And so you really need to be able to synthesize the data. I remember when I sat on the board, these were days. These weren't 1 hour meetings. These were meetings that spanned across multiple days, right? And so you really need to be able to synthesize the information for the board to understand and make knowledgeable decisions on it. The other thing to consider is that boards don't necessarily all have cybersecurity backgrounds and experience and expertise, right? And so when we synthesize the data, that's how we are able to ensure security is at the front of the agenda. It is on the boardroom agenda. It's being discussed, but it doesn't get discussed if we don't put the data properly, and that's where these dashboards and whatnot start coming in. So Penfield is able to start pulling in dashboards, like I said, around the skill sets, mean time to resolution, these dynamic graphs, dynamic processes. We're also able to take a look at which one of your alerts take the most time, least time, etc. So Penfield is really able to pull all of that into its dashboard today. Some of the cool things we're doing as product roadmap features is building scripts that people can pull the data out of Penfield and deploy it directly into their Tableau or Power BI instance. That's something that I very much brought to Penfield. I was like, people hate logging into a dashboard and then having to take the data and then put it into their own Power BI or we got to make it seamless, because SOCs aren't building reports with little screenshots, right? They're building dynamic Power BI Tableau dashboards, and so we really need to build that. So Penfield does allow you to export all of that data, and we will create scripts for that as well. So that is a roadmap feature for us.
And from an ROI perspective, I'm sure you have ROI, return on investment calculators, in terms of how long does it take to get some of the investment back, or what's that process look like as well?
So I don't have any handy that I can, rhyme off to right now. Although if you have me back on your show, I will take a note that that's something I need to have ready, or any other shows. But if the way you can do the math is, if you think about it, on average, so it depends on the size of your SOC. Right, we've seen really good results at 35% reduction in mean time to resolution, but it also depends on the size of your SOC, the number of analysts, alerts, etc. So between 25 and 35% mean time to resolution reduction. So if you take that, you take the number of analysts you have, the number of shifts that they work, reduce the mean time to resolution, and then if you're an MSSP, how much spare time does that give you to onboard another client? That ROI conversation is really, ROI math is really easy to do. If you're a SOC in and of yourself, like I said, that ROI calculation is more about how am I freeing up my analyst time to do more value add activities. So there's different conversations for different use cases. But I would say the fundamental tenet is that reduction in mean time to resolution, and then you can sort of do your math from there. The irony of the fact that I went to accounting, I don't have this ready for you.
You answered amazingly well. You answered like a person who really understands it and really figure out it. Just even if you don't have the formula, this is how we do it.
No, I don't. I should have one ready. Just write it up, put it up on the screen. No,
absolutely not. No, this is good. Listen, I feel like we have to have you on another episode. Like, I feel you haven't even started scratching the surface on a couple of these things, and then now that I know that you're like into like geopolitics, maybe we'll do a session just on what's the current events going on. Yeah, we should. Oh boy. We're just scratching the surface on what we can do on these episodes. But in the meantime, Curtis, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you and to Penfield to know more, get some more information, or like even start testing the platform?
That's a really good question. How do you get a hold of me? So my email is my first last name at Penfield.AI. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just my first last name. You'll be able to find me. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to answer, respond, get in touch, etc. Those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. Any other social media channels I have recently deleted, so I will not respond anymore on anything else. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's good, and I'll definitely will do more of these. And I said I wasn't joking about the
Yeah.
geopolitics. I think it seems like the current events are right hot off the press. So maybe we should do one very, very soon. I'll work around your schedule, Curtis. So in the meantime, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And looking forward to the next episodes, and stay safe online and offline.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. I really appreciated the time, and the conversation with you was very fun.
Yeah, well, as it should. We should all enjoy ourselves. And thanks all for joining, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care until then.